r/TrueOffMyChest. Dad chose mom over me, so I exposed their support fraud. Dad chose mom over me, so I exposed their support fraud. The text from my roommate hit me at 2 a.m. Dude, isn't that your mom? Attached to an Instagram story of someone flashing a $3,000 Hermes bag at some upscale restaurant downtown. I squinted at my cracked phone screen, surviving on 12% battery because I couldn't afford to replace the charger I'd lost last week. There she was, my stepmother Rachel, laughing with her girlfriends, designer everything, not a care in the world. Meanwhile, I'd been living off ramen and peanut butter sandwiches for 3 weeks straight. Something cold settled in my stomach as I screenshotted the image. This was the same woman who my dad claimed was struggling financially and needed extra support. The same woman whose medical expenses apparently meant I had to choose between buying textbooks and eating actual meals. I'd been tracking the lies for months without realizing it. Every time I called Dad asking why my living allowance was late again, he had another excuse. Rachel's car broke down. Rachel needed new work clothes. Rachel's therapy sessions weren't covered by insurance. Always Rachel, Rachel, Rachel. But seeing her flash that bag while I was calculating whether I could afford both laundry detergent and a bus pass this week, that's when the pieces clicked into place. I grabbed my laptop and started digging through every financial document I could access. Bank statements from the joint account Dad set up for my college expenses. Screenshots of every text where he promised money that never came. Photos of every email about overdue tuition payments that I'd had to frantically negotiate with the financial aid office. The picture that emerged made me physically sick. Over the past 8 months, Dad had diverted nearly $18,000 from my education fund. Money that was supposed to keep me housed, fed, and enrolled was instead funding Rachel's shopping addiction and spa retreats. While I was working double shifts at a campus coffee shop and still falling behind on basic expenses, she was getting weekly $200 manicures and booking weekend getaways to wine country. The financial aid office had approved my support package based on documentation that Dad provided about our family's finances and Rachel's supposed hardships. Federal grants, state aid, work-study approvals, all calculated assuming I was receiving the family support that was listed in my applications. Support that was being redirected to fund someone else's Instagram-worthy lifestyle. I'd trusted him completely. When Mom died 4 years ago, Dad was all I had left. Sure, Rachel came into the picture pretty quickly after, but Dad promised nothing would change between us. He promised college was handled, that I should focus on my studies and not worry about money. What a fucking joke. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was realizing how long I'd been making excuses for him. Every time I called asking why tuition was paid late, why my housing stipend didn't come through, why I was getting threatening emails about outstanding balances, I believed his explanations. I felt guilty for even asking, like I was being demanding or ungrateful. I'd been apologizing for asking for the support I was legally entitled to while watching it get spent on luxury handbags and couples massages. As I sat there at 3 a.m., surrounded by evidence of months of systematic lies, I realized I had a choice to make. I could keep playing the grateful stepchild, keep scraping by and maybe dropping out next semester when I couldn't cover the costs anymore. Or I could burn it all down. I opened a new document and started typing. If Dad wanted to choose Rachel over his own child, then he could live with the consequences. The first call I made was to my dad at 7 a.m. sharp, right when I knew he'd be getting ready for work. I wanted to give him one last chance to come clean, to maybe explain this massive betrayal in some way that didn't make him a complete monster. Hey kiddo, you're up early, he answered, and I could hear Rachel laughing in the background about something on her phone. Probably planning her next shopping trip. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. My voice was steadier than I felt. Where is my living allowance for this month? And don't give me another excuse about unexpected expenses. The pause was telling. Listen, things have been tight lately. You know Rachel's been having health issues, and... Stop. I cut him off. Just stop lying to me. I know about the Hermes bag. I know about the spa weekends. I know about the $200 manicures while I'm choosing between textbooks and groceries. Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had that edge I remembered from when I was younger and had pushed too far. You're being dramatic. Rachel works hard and deserves nice things sometimes. You're in college, you're supposed to learn how to budget and be responsible. This is part of growing up. The audacity actually took my breath away. Growing up. Dad, you're stealing my tuition money to buy your wife luxury goods while I'm about to get kicked out for non-payment. I'm not stealing anything, his voice turned cold. I'm managing family finances, which is my responsibility as the head of this household. Rachel is my wife, and her needs come first. You're 19 years old, figure it out. That's when I heard Rachel in the background, not even trying to be quiet, tell her we can't keep babying her forever. She needs to learn independence. The line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone, hands shaking with rage. 20 minutes later, I got a text, your attitude is unacceptable. Don't contact me again until you're ready to apologize and have an adult conversation. That's when I knew there was no going back. I walked straight to the financial aid office when it opened at 9 a.m., armed with my folder of evidence. Mrs. Peterson, my aid counselor, listened with increasingly wide eyes as I laid out the documentation. Bank statements showing the diversions, screenshots of Dad's texts promising money that never came, photos of Rachel's social media flaunting purchases made while I was behind on basic expenses. This is significant, she said finally, adjusting her glasses. If the financial support documented in your aid application isn't actually reaching you, that changes your entire eligibility profile. We'll need to investigate this thoroughly. She explained that if my family support was being misrepresented, I might qualify for additional emergency aid, but the process would require a formal review. More importantly, if federal aid calculations were based on fraudulent information, there could be serious legal implications. I have to ask, Mrs. Peterson said carefully, are you prepared for where this might lead? Once we start this investigation, it's not something you can take back. I thought about Dad's dismissive tone, about Rachel's comment about babying me, about choosing between eating and learning for the past 8 months while they lived in luxury off money meant for my survival. I'm ready, I said. Start the investigation. But as I walked out of her office, I realized Dad wasn't going to take this quietly. My phone was already buzzing with missed calls. The missed calls were just the beginning. By noon, my phone had blown up with texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in months, all with the same confused, concerned tone. Apparently Dad had launched a preemptive strike, calling everyone in our extended family with his version of events. Asterisk, heard you're having some struggles at school. Your dad is so worried about you. Asterisk, Aunt Linda. Asterisk, college stress can be overwhelming, honey. Maybe you should come home for a few days. Asterisk, Grandma Susan. Asterisk, your father says you're having some kind of breakdown. We're here if you need to talk. Asterisk, Uncle Mike. A breakdown. That's what he was telling everyone. His 19-year-old daughter was having a mental health crisis and making wild accusations instead of focusing on her studies. Classic manipulation, make me look unstable while painting himself as the concerned parent dealing with a troubled child. The genius of it hit me like a slap. If I was struggling mentally, then of course my version of events couldn't be trusted. Any evidence I presented would just be further proof of how unwell I was. He was systematically destroying my credibility before I could even tell my side of the story. But Dad made one crucial mistake. He called my maternal grandmother. Nana Margaret had never liked Rachel, barely tolerated Dad's quick remarriage after Mom's death, and had always suspected he wasn't handling my college expenses properly. When she called me at 1 p.m., her voice was sharp with suspicion. Your father just told me the most interesting story, she said without preamble. Said you're having delusions about money. But you know what's funny? Last month when I asked how your tuition was going, he got awfully defensive. I nearly cried with relief. Nana, I have proof. Screenshots, bank statements, everything. Email them to me. All of it. Right now. Within an hour, Nana had forwarded everything to my mom's brother, Uncle James, who happened to work in financial compliance for a major bank. His response was swift and furious, asterisk, this isn't just family drama. This is potentially federal fraud if financial aid was involved. Asterisk. But Dad wasn't done playing defense. At 3 p.m., I got an email that made my blood freeze. Asterisk, since you've chosen to spread lies and cause drama instead of handling this maturely, I'm officially notifying you that your college funding will cease immediately. I will not be manipulated or extorted by my own daughter. Clean out your dorm room by Friday. You're welcome to come home when you're ready to apologize to Rachel and me for this embarrassing behavior. Asterisk. He was cutting me off completely. No more partial payments, no more empty promises, nothing. In 5 days, I'd be homeless with no way to pay for spring semester registration, which was due Monday. The panic hit me in waves. Even with the financial aid investigation underway, emergency assistance could take weeks to process. I had exactly $247 in my checking account and a meal plan that expired when the semester ended in 10 days. I called Mrs. Peterson immediately, but she was in meetings until 5 p.m. The financial aid office couldn't expedite anything over the weekend. Student emergency housing required a formal application that took 3 to 5 business days to process. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing with family members trying to mediate, all convinced this was just a misunderstanding that could be resolved with a heartfelt conversation and some compromise. None of them seemed to grasp that this wasn't about hurt feelings or family conflict. This was about survival. By evening, word had spread through Dad's side of the family too, and the messages were getting nastier. Apparently, Rachel had been making her own calls, painting me as an entitled brat who was trying to destroy their marriage because I couldn't handle having a stepmother. Asterisk, really disappointed in you right now. Your dad and Rachel don't deserve this. Asterisk, cousin Sarah. Asterisk, maybe you should focus on your grades instead of stirring up family drama. Asterisk, Uncle Tom. The sides were forming, and I was losing ground fast. But then Uncle James called with news that changed everything. I've been making some calls, he said grimly. And you need to know, this goes deeper than you think. What do you mean deeper? I asked Uncle James, my stomach already dropping. I had a buddy in federal financial aid run your father's information through some databases. The documentation he submitted for your aid applications. Some of it's fabricated. Medical bills for Rachel that don't exist, income statements that don't match his actual tax filings, expense reports for dependents that aren't legitimate. The room started spinning. So this isn't just him stealing my money. No, kiddo. This is systematic fraud against federal financial aid programs. We're talking about felony charges, potential prison time. Your father didn't just redirect your money, he lied to the government to get you more aid money, then stole that too. I sank onto my dorm bed, trying to process this. How much are we talking about? Conservatively. Probably close to $40,000 over the past 2 years. Maybe more if this goes back to when you started college. $40,000. Federal fraud. Prison time. There's something else, Uncle James continued. I did some digging into Rachel's finances. She's been posting about this lifestyle for months, but her actual income from that boutique job. Maybe $25,000 a year. There's no way she's affording Hermes bags and luxury vacations on that salary. So Dad's been funding her entire lifestyle. With your college money and fraudulent federal aid, yeah. But here's the kicker, I think she knows. Some of these purchases coincide exactly with federal aid disbursement dates. That's not a coincidence. The implications hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just Dad making bad choices or prioritizing his new wife. Rachel was actively participating in stealing federal aid money that was supposed to keep me in school. My phone buzzed with another text from Dad, asterisk, I spoke to your professors. Your grades are slipping, and you missed 3 classes this week. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior that shows you're not mature enough for the independence you claim to want. Asterisk. The gaslighting was unreal. I'd missed those classes because I was working extra shifts to afford groceries, something I wouldn't have needed to do if he hadn't stolen my living allowance. Then another message, asterisk, Rachel is very hurt by your accusations. She's been nothing but kind to you, and this is how you repay her generosity. We're willing to discuss reconciliation if you're ready to make this right. Asterisk. I screenshotted both messages and forwarded them to Uncle James. His response was immediate, save everything. This is evidence of ongoing manipulation and financial abuse. But as the reality of the situation sank in, so did the terror. If Uncle James was right about the scope of this fraud, going forward with the investigation wouldn't just expose Dad and Rachel, it would destroy them completely. Federal charges, criminal records, financial ruin. And they'd know I was the one who brought their entire world crashing down. My phone rang. Rachel's number. Hi honey, her voice was sickeningly sweet. I think there's been a big misunderstanding. Your dad and I want to work this out. Why don't you come home this weekend? We can all sit down and figure out a solution that works for everyone. What kind of solution? I asked carefully. Well, we know college is stressful, and maybe we haven't been communicating clearly about finances. We want to help you succeed. But these accusations you're making, they're really hurtful, and they could cause serious problems for our family if they got to the wrong people. There it was. The threat wrapped in fake concern. We're family, she continued. We handle things privately. I'm sure once you really think about it, you'll realize that involving outsiders would just hurt everyone, including you. After I hung up, I realized they knew exactly how deep they were buried. And they were betting everything on me not being willing to bury them completely. They were about to find out how wrong they were. I made it exactly 12 hours before they escalated. Saturday morning, I woke up to my dorm room door rattling with aggressive knocking. Through the peephole, I saw Dad's face, red with fury, and Rachel standing behind him with her arms crossed. My roommate Jake had gone home for the weekend, so I was alone. Open this door right now, Dad's voice carried through the hallway. We're having this conversation whether you like it or not. My hands shook as I called campus security, but weekend staffing meant a 15-minute response time minimum. The knocking got louder. We know you're in there, Rachel's voice was sharp, all pretense of sweetness gone. Your uncle called us last night. We know what lies you've been spreading. Uncle James had confronted them. My stomach dropped as I realized they knew about the federal fraud investigation, knew about the evidence, knew exactly how much trouble they were in. This stops now, Dad shouted. You're going to call whoever you talked to and tell them you made a mistake. That you were confused and emotional and you take it all back. I pressed my back against the door, phone clutched in my hand. I'm not taking anything back. What you did is illegal. What we did. Rachel's laugh was bitter. You ungrateful little brat. Do you have any idea what your father has sacrificed for you? The debt he took on, the stress he's endured, trying to keep you in this overpriced school. With fraudulent financial aid applications, I shot back. Uncle James has the documentation. The silence that followed was terrifying. When Dad spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. You have no idea what you've just done to this family. You did this to the family when you chose to commit federal fraud. I protected this family, he exploded. You think that aid money was just handed to us? I had to make sure we qualified, had to present our situation in the right way. Everything I did was to get you the support you needed. The rationalization was breathtaking. In his mind, lying to federal agencies was just presenting our situation in the right way. Campus security finally arrived, and I heard Dad's voice shift to that charming tone he used with authority figures. Officers, thank you for coming. We're just trying to have a conversation with our daughter about some concerning behavior. Family matter, you understand. But when they asked me to open the door, the look on Dad's face told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't over. After security escorted them out, I found 17 missed calls from various relatives. The family pressure campaign had begun in earnest. Grandma Susan left a voicemail begging me to stop this madness before it destroys everyone. Cousin Sarah texted that I was tearing the family apart over money. But the call that broke my heart came from my 8-year-old cousin Emma, Uncle Tom's daughter. Why is everyone crying about you? Her small voice asked. Daddy says you're being mean to Uncle David and Aunt Rachel. Are you not going to come to Christmas anymore? That's when I realized the true scope of what I'd started. This wouldn't just destroy Dad and Rachel. The shock waves would ripple through every family gathering, every holiday, every relationship I built over the past 19 years. By Sunday night, I had my answer from Mrs. Peterson, the investigation was proceeding, and federal agents would likely be involved within the week. There was no going back now. But as I stared at my phone, filled with messages from family members who saw me as the villain in this story, I wondered if being right would be worth being completely alone. Monday morning brought a new nightmare I hadn't anticipated. I walked into my statistics class to find half the students staring at me with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. By the time I sat down, the whispers were obvious enough that Professor Martinez had to call for quiet twice. After class, my study partner Melissa cornered me by the door. Is it true your parents cut you off because you're trying to get them arrested? My blood went cold. Where did you hear that? It's all over Rachel's Facebook. She posted this long thing about how heartbroken they are that you're having mental health issues and making up stories about them. She says they're trying to get you help but you won't accept it. I grabbed Melissa's phone and scrolled through Rachel's post, my hands shaking with rage. There it was, a masterfully crafted sob story about their beloved daughter, who was struggling with the transition to adulthood and creating elaborate fantasies instead of taking responsibility for her grades and finances. The comments were full of sympathy for the devoted parents dealing with such a difficult situation. She tagged mutual friends, family members, even some of my high school classmates. The narrative was spreading like wildfire, and I was being painted as an unstable young adult lashing out at the parents who were only trying to help. The thing is, Melissa said carefully, people are saying maybe you should just apologize and move back home. Like, is staying in college really worth destroying your family? I wanted to scream. Instead, I showed her the bank statements on my phone, the screenshots of diverted funds, the evidence Uncle James had compiled. Her expression shifted from skepticism to shock to anger. Holy shit, Sam. This is actually real. Every dollar of it. But as I walked across campus, I realized that most people wouldn't take the time to look at evidence. Rachel's version was simpler, more digestible, troubled teen rebels against loving parents. My version required understanding financial aid fraud, federal regulations, and document analysis. The court of public opinion was already rendering its verdict. My phone buzzed with a call from Dean Morrison's office. My stomach dropped as I recognized the number. Miss Rodriguez, the dean's secretary said, Dean Morrison would like to see you this afternoon at 2 p.m. It's regarding some concerns that have been brought to our attention about your academic standing and personal circumstances. They'd gotten to the administration. Somehow, Dad and Rachel had managed to frame this as a student in crisis rather than a family committing fraud. I spent my lunch period in the library, frantically printing every piece of evidence I had. Bank statements, text message screenshots, Rachel's social media posts showing expensive purchases on the same dates as aid disbursements, Uncle James's preliminary findings about the falsified documents. At 1:45 p.m., I walked into the administration building carrying a folder thick enough to choke a horse. Dean Morrison was a stern woman in her 60s who'd seen every type of student crisis imaginable. She gestured for me to sit across from her mahogany desk, her expression carefully neutral. Miss Rodriguez, I received a concerning call this morning from your father. He's worried about your mental state and some accusations you've been making about family finances. He suggested that the stress of college may be overwhelming you, and perhaps a medical leave of absence would be appropriate. My heart hammered against my ribs. Dean Morrison, with respect, my father is trying to discredit me because I've discovered he's been committing federal financial aid fraud. Her eyebrows rose slightly. That's quite an accusation. It's quite a crime, I replied, sliding the folder across her desk. This is documented evidence of systematic fraud totaling approximately $40,000 over 2 years. My uncle, who works in financial compliance, has verified the falsified documents. Dean Morrison opened the folder and began reading. Her expression grew more serious with each page. After 10 minutes of silence, she looked up at me. Miss Rodriguez, if even half of this is accurate, we're not talking about a family dispute anymore. No, ma'am. We're talking about federal crimes. She closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. I'm going to need to involve our legal counsel and coordinate with the financial aid investigation already underway. But I have to warn you, once this escalates beyond our campus, you won't be able to control what happens next. I thought about little Emma asking why everyone was crying about me, about Thanksgiving dinners that would never be the same, about burning every bridge I'd ever known. I understand, Dean Morrison. But they've already made sure I can't go back. That evening, I got a call that made my blood run cold. It was Mrs. Chen, my landlord for the off-campus apartment I was supposed to move into next semester. I'm so sorry, dear, but I have to withdraw the rental agreement, she said, her voice uncomfortable. Your father called me today and explained about your situation. He said you're having some personal difficulties and might not be able to maintain the lease responsibly. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. Mrs. Chen, I've already paid the deposit. We have a signed contract. Yes, but he also mentioned you might be taking a leave from school for health reasons. I can't risk renting to someone whose circumstances are so uncertain. I'll mail your deposit back within the week. After she hung up, I realized the true genius of Dad's strategy. He wasn't just attacking my credibility, he was systematically dismantling my ability to stay in school even if the financial aid came through. No apartment meant no off-campus housing, and dorm registration for spring semester had closed weeks ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake, my roommate, dude, my parents are freaking out about rooming with you next year. They saw some Facebook post about family drama and think you might be unstable. I tried to defend you but they're threatening to cut my funding if I don't request a room change. Rachel's social media campaign was working perfectly. She wasn't just telling her story, she was making sure I had nowhere to land even if I won the legal battle. But Tuesday morning brought an unexpected ally. Miss Rodriguez. A woman in a crisp business suit approached me outside the student center. I'm Agent Patricia Hawkins with the Department of Education's Office of Inspector General. I understand you filed a complaint about financial aid fraud. My heart started racing. Yes, ma'am. We'd like to interview you formally. The preliminary evidence suggests this case may be part of a larger pattern we've been investigating. Can you come to our field office this afternoon? Larger pattern. That phrase echoed in my head as I sat in a sterile government building 3 hours later, recounting everything to Agent Hawkins and her partner, Agent Martinez. Your stepmother's spending patterns match what we've seen in 17 other cases over the past 3 years, Agent Hawkins explained. Luxury purchases coinciding with federal aid disbursements, social media documentation of lifestyle inconsistent with reported income, falsified medical expenses. 17 other cases. We believe there's been organized coaching on how to manipulate financial aid applications. Someone's been teaching people exactly what documentation to falsify and how to divert the funds without detection. The room felt like it was tilting. You think Rachel is part of some kind of organized scheme? We think your stepmother may have been recruited by someone already running this type of fraud. The methods are too sophisticated and consistent to be coincidental. They showed me social media posts from other women, all married to men with college-age children, all suddenly living lavish lifestyles while their stepchildren struggled financially. The pattern was unmistakable once they pointed it out. We'll need you to maintain contact with your family as if nothing has changed, Agent Martinez said. Can you do that? I thought about Dad's rage, Rachel's threats, the family members who already saw me as the villain. What if they figure out I'm cooperating? The agents exchanged a look that didn't fill me with confidence. Miss Rodriguez, if we're right about the scope of this operation, your family is in significantly more trouble than you initially realized. But we need evidence of the coaching, the coordination with other families. That means you might need to get closer to them, not further away. As I walked back to campus, I realized I wasn't just fighting for my college education anymore. I was about to become an undercover federal informant against my own family. The plan Agent Hawkins laid out was simple in theory, terrifying in practice. I had to pretend the federal investigation didn't exist, reach out to Dad and Rachel like I wanted to reconcile, and try to record them discussing how they manipulated my financial aid applications. We need them to admit to the falsified documents, Agent Martinez had explained. But more importantly, we need to know who taught them how to do it. Someone with inside knowledge of federal aid systems is coaching these families. So Wednesday morning, I sent the hardest text of my life, asterisk, Dad, I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe I overreacted. Can we talk? Asterisk. He called within 5 minutes. Samantha, thank God you've come to your senses. His relief was palpable. Rachel and I have been so worried about you. I'm scared about money, and I guess I lashed out. Can you help me understand how the financial aid stuff actually works? I feel so lost. The line went quiet for a moment, and I held my breath, praying I hadn't overplayed it. Of course, sweetheart. These systems are complicated, and you're young. Why don't you come home Friday night? We can sit down and go through everything together, show you how we've been managing to keep you in school despite our financial challenges. My stomach churned at his patronizing tone, but I forced enthusiasm into my voice. That would be great. I'm sorry for causing so much drama. We forgive you, honey. Family forgives family. Rachel's making your favorite dinner Friday night. After I hung up, I immediately called Agent Hawkins to report the conversation. Perfect, she said. We'll get you wired up before you go. But Sam, you need to understand the risks. If they figure out what you're doing, what happens to me? People facing federal fraud charges sometimes make desperate choices. Just, be careful. Thursday brought a new complication I hadn't expected. I was walking to my economics class when someone grabbed my arm from behind. You little bitch. I spun around to find myself face to face with a woman I didn't recognize, mid-40s, blonde highlights, designer workout clothes. Her eyes were blazing with fury. I'm sorry, do I know you? I'm Jennifer Walsh. My husband Mike works with your father. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper. Thanks to your little tantrum, federal agents showed up at our house yesterday asking questions about our daughter's financial aid. My blood went cold. The investigation was spreading faster than I'd expected. They wanted to know about expensive purchases, about how we qualified for so much aid despite Mike's salary, about who helped us with our applications. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into my arm. Ring any bells? I tried to pull away, but her grip tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. Like hell you don't. Your stepmother introduced me to someone who helped us maximize Emma's aid package. Said it was totally legal, just presenting our situation in the best light. Now we're looking at federal charges because you couldn't handle your family problems privately. Someone had coached the Walshes too. Rachel wasn't just a victim of fraud, she was actively recruiting other families. Let go of me, I said loudly, hoping someone would notice. You have no idea what you've started, Jennifer hissed. There are 5 families in our social circle who used the same consultant. 5 families who are now under investigation because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. She finally released my arm and stalked away, but not before adding, fix this, or you'll have a lot more enemies than just your parents. I stood there shaking, realizing the scope of what I'd uncovered was even bigger than the agent suspected. This wasn't just about my family or even 17 cases nationwide. This was about Rachel running a local financial aid fraud ring, and I just painted a target on my back for every family involved. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, asterisk, stop talking to the feds or you'll regret it. Asterisk. Then another, asterisk, drop the investigation now. Asterisk. And another, asterisk, we know where your dorm room is. Asterisk. As I hurried toward the safety of the campus security office, I realized going home to my father's house tomorrow night might be walking into a trap. But it was too late to back out now. The anonymous threats kept coming all Thursday night. By Friday morning, I'd received 12 messages from different numbers, all variations of drop the investigation and keep your mouth shut. Campus security took screenshots but said without direct threats of violence, there wasn't much they could do. I met Agent Hawkins at a coffee shop off campus at noon to get fitted with a recording device. She slipped me what looked like a regular pen, but the tip contained a tiny microphone that would pick up conversations within 15 feet. Just act natural, she instructed. Get them talking about how they filled out your financial aid applications, who helped them understand the process. If Rachel mentions helping other families, that's gold. What if they search me or something? The device looks completely normal. But if you feel unsafe at any point, call this number. She handed me a card with a phone number written in pen. We'll have agents in the area, but we can't be too close without risking exposure. As I drove toward my childhood home, my hands were shaking so badly I had to pull over twice. Every car behind me looked suspicious. Every phone notification made me jump. Dad's house looked exactly the same, perfectly manicured lawn, Rachel's white BMW in the driveway, warm lights glowing in the windows. It was hard to believe that just a week ago, I would have felt safe here. Rachel answered the door with the biggest fake smile I'd ever seen. Samantha. We've missed you so much, sweetheart. She pulled me into a hug that felt like being embraced by a snake. Dad appeared behind her, and for a moment, his expression was genuinely relieved. There's my girl. Come on, let's get you fed. You look too thin. Over dinner, they performed concern beautifully. Rachel had made lasagna, my mom's recipe that she'd somehow gotten hold of. Dad asked about my classes, my roommate, whether I was getting enough sleep. Anyone watching would think they were model parents. It wasn't until we moved to the living room that the real conversation began. So, Dad said, settling into his armchair, let's talk about this financial aid confusion. I know the forms can be overwhelming. I perched on the edge of the couch, hyper-aware of the recording pen in my jacket pocket. I guess I just don't understand how we qualified for so much aid. Like, your salary seems too high for need-based grants. Rachel and Dad exchanged a quick glance that I almost missed. Well, honey, Rachel said carefully, there are ways to present your family's financial picture that highlight legitimate hardships. When your dad and I got married, I brought some debt into the relationship, some medical expenses from before we met. But those medical expenses were from like 5 years ago, I said, trying to sound confused rather than accusatory. How do they count for my current aid applications? Another glance between them. Dad cleared his throat. Sometimes these situations are ongoing. Chronic conditions, long-term payment plans. The aid office needs to understand the full scope of a family's financial obligations. Who helped you figure all that out? It sounds complicated. The silence stretched just a beat too long. We just did research, Rachel said finally. Online resources, talking to other parents who'd been through the process. But I caught Dad shooting her a sharp look, and I knew I was onto something. Oh, other parents? Like who? Maybe I could talk to their kids about their experience. That's not really appropriate, Dad said quickly. These are private family matters. Rachel's phone buzzed on the coffee table. When she glanced at it, her face went pale. Excuse me for just a second, she said, grabbing the phone and stepping into the kitchen. I could hear her voice through the doorway, urgent and low. I told you, she's here trying to make nice. But if the agents talk to Jennifer? No, I can't just. What do you mean, handle it? Dad was watching me carefully, and I forced myself to look interested in the family photos on the mantel instead of straining to hear Rachel's conversation. When she came back, her demeanor had completely shifted. Samantha, she said, her voice cold now, we need to discuss exactly what you told those investigators. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I gripped the arm of the couch, trying to keep my expression neutral while my heart hammered against my ribs. What investigators? I asked, praying my voice sounded steadier than I felt. Rachel's laugh was sharp and humorless. Don't play dumb, sweetheart. We know federal agents have been asking questions. We know your uncle has been running his mouth. The question is, how much damage have you already done? Dad leaned forward in his chair, his earlier warmth completely gone. We brought you here to fix this, Samantha. To give you a chance to make this right before it destroys everything we've built. I don't understand what you want me to fix, I said, though the recording pen in my pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. You're going to call whoever you talk to and tell them you made a mistake, Rachel said, pulling her phone back out. That you were confused and emotional, and you want to withdraw your complaint. Rachel, This isn't a negotiation. Her voice cut through my protest like ice. Do you have any idea how many people you're hurting? Jennifer Walsh's daughter might have to drop out of nursing school. The Hendersons could lose their house. 3 other families are looking at criminal charges because you couldn't handle your family problems like an adult. The scope of the fraud ring was becoming clearer with every word, and I hoped the pen was picking up everything. How do you even know all these families? I asked. Another sharp look passed between them. We move in the same social circles, Dad said carefully. When you have kids in college, you talk to other parents about the process. But if they're facing criminal charges for financial aid fraud, that means they were doing something illegal, right? Just like what? Rachel's voice was dangerously quiet. I pushed too hard. The room felt like a trap closing around me. Nothing, I just meant that if the government is investigating, there must be some kind of problem with how the applications were filled out. Dad stood up abruptly, and I fought the urge to flinch. The problem is that you turned a private family matter into a federal case. You've put all of us at risk because you were too proud to accept help. Help. Dad, you stole my tuition money to buy her designer bags. The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. My cheek exploded with pain, and I tasted blood where my teeth cut the inside of my mouth. Don't you dare speak to my wife that way, Dad snarled, standing over me. After everything we've done for you, everything we've sacrificed. Rachel's phone rang, and she answered immediately. Yes. What do you mean they're expanding it? How many more families? Shit. She hung up and looked at Dad with panic in her eyes. It's gotten worse. They're looking at financial aid fraud across 3 states now. They think there's organized coaching involved. Organized coaching? I repeated, touching my stinging cheek. Shut up, Rachel snapped. This is all your fault. If you'd just been grateful for what you had instead of poking around where you didn't belong. Dad began pacing, running his hands through his hair. We need to think. There has to be a way to contain this. Maybe if she disappeared for a while, Rachel said quietly. Took a leave of absence, had some kind of breakdown. People would understand why her testimony might be unreliable. The threat hung in the air like poison. I stood up slowly, calculating the distance to the front door. Where do you think you're going? Dad asked. I think I should leave. No, Rachel said, stepping between me and the hallway. I think you should stay right here until we figure out how to clean up the mess you've made. That's when I realized I wasn't a guest anymore. I was a prisoner. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and Rachel's eyes immediately snapped to the sound. Give me your phone, she demanded, holding out her hand. What? Why? Because I don't trust you not to be recording this conversation or texting your precious federal agents, she said, her voice dripping with venom. Phone. Now. Dad moved closer, backing up her demand. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and handed it over, praying they wouldn't think to check my jacket pocket where the recording pen sat hidden. Rachel immediately started scrolling through my recent calls and messages. Agent Hawkins called you 6 times this week, she said, showing Dad the screen. And here's a text from Uncle James about maintaining evidence integrity. My stomach plummeted. They knew I'd been cooperating actively with the investigation. You little spy, Dad breathed, his face flushing red with rage. You've been feeding them information this whole time. The recording pen, Rachel said suddenly, her eyes going wide. Jennifer said the agents asked her about recorded conversations. They probably wired you. Before I could react, she lunged forward and started grabbing at my jacket. I tried to pull away, but Dad caught my arm and held me still while Rachel searched my pockets. Got it, she said triumphantly, pulling out the pen. She held it up to the light, examining it carefully. Clever little device. How long have you been wearing a wire, you treacherous bitch? This is the first time, I said quickly, hoping to minimize the damage. They just wanted me to ask about the applications. Rachel threw the pen on the floor and stomped on it with her heel, crushing the delicate electronics. Well, that's the end of that. Sit down. We need to figure out what you've already given them. Dad forced me back onto the couch, his grip tight enough to bruise. Start talking. Every conversation, every document, every piece of evidence. I want to know exactly what they have. My mind raced, trying to figure out how much to reveal. If I told them everything, they'd know how deep the investigation went. But if I lied and they found out later? The bank statements showing the diverted funds, I said finally. Screenshots of your texts about delayed payments. Uncle James's analysis of the falsified documents. What falsified documents? Dad asked sharply. I realized I'd revealed something they didn't know the agents had discovered. The medical expenses for Rachel that don't match actual billing records. Income statements that don't align with your tax filings. Rachel and Dad exchanged a look of pure panic. How could they possibly know about the medical expenses? Rachel whispered. Because someone taught you exactly what fake documentation to submit, I said, pieces clicking together in my mind. Someone who knew which databases they cross-reference, which red flags to avoid. Who was it, Rachel? Who's been coaching all these families? She slapped me across the same cheek Dad had hit earlier, sending fresh pain shooting through my face. You don't ask questions. You answer them. But Dad was staring at her with dawning realization. Rachel, who did you talk to about optimizing our applications? You said you had a friend who understood the system. David, not now, she said quickly. No, I think now is exactly the right time, he said slowly. Because if federal agents know about falsified documents, that means someone with access to verification systems has been helping people create them. The room went dead silent except for the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. You told me it was all legal, Dad continued, his voice getting dangerously quiet. You said your friend just knew how to present information in the best light. Rachel's face had gone white. It was legal. It is legal. Falsifying medical records is legal. Dad stood up, towering over both of us. Because that's what they're investigating, isn't it? Not just creative accounting, but actual document fraud. For the first time since I'd arrived, Rachel looked truly afraid. And I realized Dad was just figuring out that he might be the biggest victim in the room. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Dad's phone started ringing. He glanced at the screen and his face went ashen. It's my boss, he said quietly. Why would Richard be calling me at 8 p.m. on a Friday? Rachel lunged for the phone. Don't answer it. But Dad was already swiping to accept. Hello, Richard. What? No, I haven't seen the news. His face crumpled as he listened. How many employees? I see. Monday morning. Yes, sir. He hung up and stared at the phone like it had bitten him. David? Rachel's voice was barely a whisper. 3 employees at my company have been arrested for financial aid fraud, Dad said slowly. Federal agents raided the office today. Richard says anyone involved in the scheme will be terminated immediately, and the company's cooperating fully with the investigation to avoid losing their federal contracts. The room felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of it. But you work in IT, I said, confused. How would your coworkers even know about financial aid? Dad's eyes moved to Rachel, and I watched 20 years of trust crumble in real time. Unless someone was recruiting people from my office specifically. Someone who knew exactly which employees had college-age kids and might be desperate enough to take financial risks. David, let me explain, Rachel started, but he cut her off with a gesture. How many of my coworkers did you approach, Rachel? She said nothing, but her guilty silence was answer enough. Jesus Christ, Dad breathed. You weren't just committing fraud. You were using my workplace connections to recruit other victims. Do you have any idea what this means for my career? I was trying to help people, Rachel said defensively. These families were struggling with college costs. I found someone who could help them maximize their aid, and... Who? Dad and I said at the same time. Rachel's phone buzzed with an incoming call. When she looked at the screen, her face went chalk white. Answer it, Dad commanded. Put it on speaker. With shaking hands, Rachel accepted the call and activated speakerphone. Rachel, sweetheart, a smooth male voice filled the room. I hear we have a problem. Marcus, things have gotten complicated. Complicated? The man's laugh was cold. Federal agents are arresting my clients. That college girl's investigation has triggered a multi-state task force. I'd say we've moved well beyond complicated. I felt my blood freeze. This was the mastermind, the person coaching all these families. What do you need me to do? Rachel asked, her voice small. Well, the good news is that most of my clients don't know my real identity. The bad news is that you do. Which creates a very specific problem that needs to be solved. The threat was crystal clear even if the words were vague. Dad stepped closer to the phone. Who the hell is this? You must be the husband. David, right? IT manager at Cornerstone Federal. You have a lovely wife, David. Very persuasive. She's brought me almost 24 families over the past 3 years. 24 families. The scope was staggering. I never meant for anyone to get hurt, Rachel whispered. Of course not. You just wanted your designer lifestyle funded by federal aid money meant for struggling students. Nothing wrong with that. Marcus's voice dripped sarcasm. But now we need to discuss damage control. What kind of damage control? Dad asked, though I could tell he was afraid of the answer. The kind that ensures certain witnesses aren't available to testify about who taught them how to manipulate federal applications. The kind that makes this look like individual families making honest mistakes rather than an organized conspiracy. I tried to stand up, but Dad's hand clamped down on my shoulder, holding me in place. I'm not doing anything to hurt Samantha, Dad said firmly. David, you're facing 20 years in federal prison. Your wife is looking at even longer. Sometimes difficult choices have to be made to protect the people we love. Rachel was crying now, but whether from fear or guilt, I couldn't tell. I have a better idea, Marcus continued. Why don't I come over and we can discuss this in person? I'm already in the neighborhood. The line went dead, and we all stared at each other in horror. Someone was coming to our house, and I was pretty sure they weren't planning a friendly conversation about cooperation agreements. The next 20 minutes felt like hours. Dad had started pacing frantically, muttering about federal prison and lost careers. Rachel sat frozen on the couch, mascara streaking down her cheeks. And I was calculating escape routes while trying not to look like I was calculating escape routes. We need to call the police, I said finally. And tell them what? Dad snapped. That we've been committing federal fraud and now our criminal contact is coming over to discuss witness intimidation. That'll go great. David's right, Rachel said quietly. We're already in too deep. Maybe if we cooperate with Marcus, help him figure out how to minimize the damage. I stared at her in disbelief. You want to cooperate with someone who just threatened to make witnesses unavailable? Do you hear yourself right now? You don't understand, she shot back. Marcus has information on dozens of families. If he goes down, he'll drag everyone with him out of spite. But if we can work something out. He's not going to work something out. I stood up despite Dad's restraining hand. He's coming here to clean up loose ends, and we're the loose ends. A car door slammed outside. We all froze, listening to footsteps coming up the front walkway. Dad moved to the window and peered through the curtains. Black sedan, tinted windows, he whispered. That's not Marcus. Hope flared in my chest. Maybe it's the federal agents. Maybe they've been monitoring the calls. But the footsteps passed by our front door and continued to the house next door. Mrs. Patterson's porch light came on, and we heard her voice greeting someone cheerfully. False alarm, Dad said, but his relief was short-lived. Rachel's phone buzzed with a text, slight delay. Had to handle another situation first. Be there in 30 minutes. Make sure everyone stays put. Another situation. I repeated. What kind of situation requires handling before coming here? Rachel's phone immediately rang. She looked at the caller ID and her face crumpled. It's Jennifer Walsh. Answer it, Dad ordered. Speaker. Rachel. Jennifer's voice was hysterical. They took Mike. Federal agents arrested him an hour ago. They had boxes of evidence, recordings, bank statements. They knew everything about the coaching, about Marcus, about how many families were involved. My heart started hammering. If they'd arrested Mr. Walsh, that meant the investigation was moving fast. But it also meant Marcus knew the net was closing in. Did they ask about me? Rachel whispered. Are you kidding me? Of course they asked about you. You're the one who introduced me to Marcus in the first place. Rachel, they have recordings of phone calls. They know about the recruitment, the falsified documents, all of it. Dad grabbed the phone from Rachel. Jennifer, this is David. Did the agents say anything about coming here? They asked where they could find you and Rachel. I told them I didn't know, but David, they're working their way through everyone tonight. House to house, making arrests. The blood drained from my face. If federal agents were conducting simultaneous raids, that meant they saw this as time-sensitive. Maybe because they knew Marcus was cleaning house. We need to leave, I said urgently. Right now. We can drive to the federal building downtown, turn ourselves in safely. Turn ourselves in. Rachel laughed bitterly. I'm not going to prison because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. You're going to prison anyway. I shouted. The only question is whether you survive long enough to get there. Dad's phone buzzed with a news alert. He glanced at it and went pale. Local news is reporting federal raids across the tri-state area related to organized financial aid fraud. They're calling it Operation Diploma Mill. As if summoned by the news report, headlights swept across our front window. A sleek black car pulled into our driveway, engine purring quietly. That's not the feds, Dad said grimly. Government cars don't look like that. Through the window, I watched a tall man in an expensive suit step out of the car. He moved with the casual confidence of someone who owned every room he entered, checking his phone as he walked toward our front door. Marcus, Rachel breathed. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by a polite knock. Evening folks, Marcus called through the door, his voice friendly and conversational. I know it's late, but we really do need to chat. Dad looked at Rachel, then at me, then at the back door across the kitchen. Rachel, sweetheart, Marcus continued, I can see the lights on. And I know you're all in there because David's car is in the garage and the college girl's Honda is in the driveway. Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. The casual mention of knowing our cars, our locations, our routines made my skin crawl. What do we do? Rachel whispered. Before anyone could answer, Marcus spoke again, and this time his tone had lost all pretense of friendliness. Option 1, you open this door and we have a civilized conversation about mutual cooperation. Option 2, I let myself in, and we have a very different kind of conversation. You have 30 seconds to decide which option appeals to you more. Dad moved toward the front door, and I realized with growing horror that he was actually going to let this man into our house. I watched Dad's hand move toward the deadbolt, and something inside me snapped into pure survival mode. Don't open that door, I hissed, grabbing his arm. Dad, please. Once he's inside, we have no control over what happens. We don't have control now, he whispered back, but his hand hesitated on the lock. Marcus's voice came through the door again, still conversational but with an edge that made my teeth clench. 20 seconds, folks. I'm really hoping we can keep this friendly. Rachel had gone completely catatonic, staring at the door like it might explode. Her phone buzzed with another call, this time the display showed unknown number. That's probably another family he's been handling, I said, the pieces clicking together in my mind. Dad, he's not here to negotiate. He's here to make sure we can't testify. The sound of Marcus trying the door handle made us all freeze. When it didn't turn, we heard him sigh dramatically. Really, folks? We're going to do this the hard way. His footsteps moved away from the front door, crunching across the gravel toward the side of the house. He's going around back, Dad said, his face going white. The sliding door doesn't have a deadbolt. We all rushed toward the kitchen just as the back porch light triggered for motion. Through the glass door, Marcus waved at us like he was arriving for a dinner party, then pulled something small and metallic from his jacket pocket. Is that a lockpick? Rachel breathed. Worse, Dad said grimly. It's a glass cutter. Marcus pressed the device against the sliding door near the handle and began making a careful circle in the glass. He worked with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this before, many times. My phone. I realized they still had my phone, but Dad's was in his pocket. I lunged for it, but he caught my wrist. If you call 911, he'll hear the sirens coming and disappear, Dad said. Then we'll never know who else he's planning to target. I don't care about his other targets. I whispered furiously. I care about not ending up like whatever other situation he had to handle before coming here. The glass cutter finished its work with a soft pop. Marcus carefully removed the circular piece of glass and reached through to unlock the sliding door. Good evening, everyone, he said pleasantly, stepping into our kitchen like he owned the place. I do apologize for the dramatic entrance, but time is rather important tonight. Up close, Marcus looked like a successful businessman, maybe 45, graying temples, expensive watch. The kind of person you trust with your mortgage application or retirement planning. Which, I realized, probably made him very good at his actual job. Now then, he continued, settling into one of our kitchen chairs without being invited, we need to discuss damage control. The good news is that most of tonight's arrests were people who only knew Rachel's first name and a burner phone number. The bad news is that this household represents a significant information security risk. What do you want from us? Dad asked, his voice steadier than I'd expected. Cooperation. Specifically, I need to know exactly what evidence the federal agents have collected, who they've interviewed, and what Rachel might have told them about our business relationship. I didn't tell them anything about you, Rachel said quickly. I didn't even know your real name until tonight. Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Rachel, darling, we both know that's not entirely true. You've seen my financial records, you know how I process payments, you've referred families directly to my personal phone number. You know quite a lot about my operations. He pulled out his own phone and showed us the screen, a news article with the headline, Multi-State Financial Aid Fraud Ring Under Federal Investigation. This story went live 20 minutes ago, he said. By tomorrow morning, it'll be national news. Every family I've ever worked with will be scrambling to cut deals with federal prosecutors. And the first person to provide detailed information about the organizing structure. He paused meaningfully. Gets the best plea bargain, Dad finished. Exactly. Which means I have a very narrow window to ensure that the information landscape remains favorable to my interests. The casual way he discussed manipulating federal investigations made my blood run cold. What does that mean for us? I asked, though I was terrified of the answer. Marcus looked at me for the first time, his gaze calculating and cold. Well, that depends entirely on how cooperative your family chooses to be. My hands were shaking as Marcus stared at me with those cold, calculating eyes, but before he could elaborate on what cooperation meant, the house suddenly flooded with blinding white light from outside. Federal agents. The house is surrounded. Marcus's composed mask cracked for the first time. He spun toward the windows as red and blue lights strobed across the walls, and I heard car doors slamming, boots on gravel, radios crackling with tactical communications. Nobody fucking move. Marcus snarled, his businessman persona evaporating as he reached into his jacket. But Dad was faster. He grabbed the heavy ceramic fruit bowl from the counter and smashed it across Marcus's wrist before he could draw whatever he'd been reaching for. The front door exploded inward with a deafening crash. Federal agents. Hands where we can see them. Agent Hawkins came through first, weapon drawn, followed by a team of agents in tactical gear. David Rodriguez, Rachel Rodriguez, Marcus Webb, you're all under arrest. Marcus tried to bolt for the back door, but 2 agents were already there. He made it 3 steps before they tackled him to the kitchen floor, screaming about his rights and demanding his lawyer. Samantha, are you injured? Agent Hawkins asked, quickly checking me over while other agents secured the scene. I'm okay, I said, though I was anything but okay. My whole body was shaking with adrenaline and relief. How did you know to come? When your wire went dead, we moved surveillance closer. We've been listening to the whole conversation through directional microphones. She held up a small device. Every word Marcus said about handling situations and ensuring witness cooperation, we got all of it. As they handcuffed Marcus, he was still trying to maintain some semblance of control. This is entrapment, he called out. I was here for a social visit with family friends. Agent Martinez laughed as he read Marcus his rights. Mr. Webb, we have you on tape discussing witness intimidation, conspiracy to commit fraud, and enough RICO violations to put you away for 30 years. Your social visit just became the centerpiece of our prosecution. Dad and Rachel were handcuffed too, but more gently. As they led Rachel past me, she started crying again. Samantha, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. Yes, you did, I said quietly. You meant for all of it to happen. You just didn't mean to get caught. Agent Hawkins stayed with me as the others were loaded into separate vehicles. The recording device we gave you stopped working, but it transmitted everything up until Rachel destroyed it. Combined with tonight's admissions, we have enough to prosecute the entire network. How many families total? 43 across 7 states. Marcus Webb has been running this operation for almost 5 years. Your case broke it wide open. As I watched the police cars disappear down our street, neighbors peering out from behind curtains, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, relief. Not happiness, I just watched my father and stepmother get arrested, and our family was destroyed forever. But relief that the lies were finally over. What happens to me now? I asked. Agent Hawkins smiled, and for the first time it looked genuinely warm. Well, the Department of Education is very interested in making sure fraud victims can complete their education. I think you'll find your financial aid situation gets resolved quickly. And there might be restitution payments from seized assets. 3 months later, I was back in my dorm room, fully funded through a combination of legitimate aid and restitution from Marcus's seized accounts. Dad pled guilty and got 8 years. Rachel got 12. Marcus got 25 to life under RICO statutes. Uncle James called it justice. I called it surviving. The hardest part wasn't the trials or the media attention or even the family members who still blamed me for destroying everything. The hardest part was realizing I'd been willing to burn it all down, and discovering I was strong enough to rise from the ashes.